Well, good morning, Wareham. It is Monday, July 1st. And as usual, I have a great show here for you. The news headlines, the weather report, and today in history. This morning, the genius behind the owl, Mcmahon in the fresh, right here in the studio discussing his craft. And also from all the fruits that are grown in America, only 3 are native to this land. Concord grape, blueberry, and can you guess the third one? Find out the answer on today's program. But first, I would like to take this moment to thank Not Your Average Antiques, an antique shop down Cranberry Highway in East Wareham, for donating the props that you see in the morning show. So stay tuned because the weather report and the news headlines are next. Well, plenty of sunshine today with high at 78 degrees, partly cloudy skies during the evening, giving way to cloudy skies overnight, low at 63. Tomorrow, sunshine with high of 83 degrees with partial cloudiness skies at night with low at 63. And now to the news. There were few news stories over the week, and here are the news headlines. Wicked Local Wareham had the following stories. That is Wareham fighting addiction, and the Church of Good Shepherd sponsoring a presentation titled Treating Opioid Addiction from the Perspective of the Hospital Emergency Department. This presentation will take place on Wednesday, July 17th. The presentation will be held at the Church of Good Shepherd, 74 High Street, beginning at 6 p.m. and will include the following. What are the new opioids to fear? What happens when someone with an opioid addiction comes to an emergency room? What is the immediate treatment? What is the follow-up care? And how can you save a life by caring and knowing how to use Narcan? For more information, please email Wareham Fighting Against Addiction Coalition at warhamfightingagainstaddiction at AOL.com, or visit their Facebook page, Wareham Fighting Against Addiction Coalition. And to another news, Wareham Police Department have reported an arrest of a man who was accused of accosting a woman. The incident happened when a woman was strolling with her baby on Sunday morning at 11th Street near Warburn Avenue. And that's when a male came from behind and physically accosted her before running off. The victim was able to snap a few pictures of him fleeing. The suspect's identity has not been released. And that's all for today's news. Stay with us. We'll be back after this short break. Well, apart from Concord grape and blueberry, cranberries are the third native berry in Northern American region. To my surprise, there is actually a cranberry experimental station right here in Wareham that has been researching cranberries to secure their vitality for the past 100 years and counting. Here is a bit about the Cranberry Station, an affiliate of UMass Amherst College. From the bogs, the vines, to the berry, Cranberries are one of the most unique fruits, and its industry influences the economy and character of southeastern Massachusetts. Cranberries are so important that there is an entire department, an entire facility dedicated just for their survival. That place is nowhere but right here in Wareham. Just off Spectacle Pond Road at One State Bog Road in East Wareham stands the UMass Cranberry Station. This affiliate of the University of Massachusetts Amherst traces back to 1911 under the guardianship of Dr. Henry Franklin. For longer than 100 years, the station has been conducting experiments and research on behalf of the cranberry industry in Massachusetts.
Our whole mission is to really provide whatever horticultural resources and solutions that the growers need in order to remain viable within this area, and to also have environmental stewardship, so that we, think about the citizens that live in this area and the impact that our industry has.
Using experiments, the center helps farmers to be flexible with the industry's demands. Currently, farmers are under pressure to produce a certain quality of berry, distinguished by color and firmness, a task that has fallen on Dr. Giverson Mupambe.
But sometimes what we've noticed in the past seasons that growers are struggling to get that color. So these plant growth regulators that we're thinking about, we're thinking specifically of abscisic acid, which has been shown to improve the anthocyanin concentration. So anthocyanin is the pigment that gives the fruit its red color.
Dr. Mupambe is searching for whether improving formation of anthocyanin may produce the right shade of redness. Furthermore, he is studying canopy management.
Because the other factor when you think about fruit colors, you need light penetration into your canopy. How much light penetration do you get in the canopy, and does that result in a more uniform coloring within the canopy? So normally if you go in the canopy and you open it up, you find that the berries at the bottom of the canopy, usually they struggle to color up, even when you have like a nice uniform red color on the top. And we think some of that has to do with the lack of light penetration into the bottom of the canopy.
There is also the challenge of climate change. Take anthocyanin, for example. The color pigment is triggered by light penetration, but mostly by cooler temperatures. Our most recent winters haven't been favorable.
I don't know if you remember last September, we probably had 6 or 7 nights. It didn't go below 70 degrees, and that's way too warm. And so what's happening is that the color doesn't develop, and the handlers want you to bring in a fruit that has a certain amount of red pigment, because that's what cranberries are known for. So you're waiting for the color development, but the longer the fruits stay out in the bog, the greater chance that they're going to lose quality, because they're going to start succumbing to fruit rot.
The abundance of rainfall also has proved irresponsible, at times flooding the vines, which can lead to fruit loss. Though irrigation is important, specifics matters, as Dr. Peter Jerenyama explains.
You can't grow a plant without water. But then the question becomes, how much water do we need to put in there? Because we have a tendency of over-irrigating. Like, there's this notion that cranberry requires 1 inch of water a week, 1 inch of water per week. But that is not based on any scientific reasoning.
So Dr. Jerenyama and his colleagues have come up with something called evaporated demand, a way to determine the exact amount of water needed at a given time.
Right here, I'm carrying one of the sensors. This is called a tensiometer. You can view this like a big, a giant root in the soil. So it has a ceramic tip. So having a ceramic, so you put this device in the soil, and the water is going to be absorbed through the ceramic tip. And the amount of water that is taken into the cylinder will equate to a certain amount of pressure that will be recorded on a recording device. So we've come up with a relationship between stress levels based on the tension that you get in the soil. So the wetter the soils are, the lower the tension is going to be. And the drier the soils are, the greater the tension is going to be. So that's why we know when it is too wet or when it is too dry.
The center is also helping farmers harvest berries that can make the weight. Currently, the incentive starts at $4.55 to $5.50 kilogram per millimeter. What have you seen in terms of maybe trends with pesticides? What is threatening the berry at the moment?
So our trends with pesticides have been moving away from very toxic, broad spectrum, particularly insecticides, to things that we call reduced risk, that are more targeted.
We do have some cranberry insects that are pests, and a lot of them. Because it's a native fruit, we have 25 different insect pests. He's rolled up because he's been eating cranberry all day. There's a gypsy moth there and then another cutworm. Cranberry weevil is a tiny insect that has been causing a lot of trouble this year. We do have to put on sprays to manage these insects, or they will eat all of your flowers and you will get no cranberries. So in entomology, we have 25 or 30 different insects that we're always thinking about. And there are new insects like scale. If you can imagine that you have your upright and there's something that looks like that on there, so you can't even see it unless it's under the microscope. This is a new insect that we haven't seen in 80 years. So that one's kind of cool. And right now the crawlers, little babies, are being released out of there, so that's another problem for the growers.
Why are they coming back after 80 years?
Either because there's climate change and good conditions for them, or we're not using broad spectrum pesticides anymore where we're spraying and killing everything so that there's the opening for them, or we have new varieties that are softer tissued and give them the option. We don't know.
Are there any pesticides that are good for the berry?
We do have a number of insecticides now that instead of being broad spectrum, they're specific to the insect. And yes, the one that we have, cranberry fruitworm, which is a little moth that lays its egg on the berry as it's developing, we have a new compound called Altacor that doesn't hurt bees, doesn't hurt us, but targets just that fruitworm. So we feel that that's the magic new insecticide that we have that has really helped us out. Of course, it costs about $50 an acre, so it's expensive for the growers.
The services and research conducted here are available to farmers for free. The center helps farmers connect to the bottom line on the cost saved and the money made if they choose to implement the knowledge. But lately, knowledge hasn't been enough as the industry faces substantial doubts. Would you say the industry is flourishing?
No, not at all. The industry is very much struggling at this time because there's an oversupply of fruit, and so prices are depressed. And so it's predicted that for the majority of the industry this year, growers will be paid less per barrel than it costs them to produce that barrel. So we figure it costs maybe $25 to $30 a barrel to produce it. Growers are probably going to be paid $20 or less. So they'll actually be losing money for every barrel of cranberries that they produce.
So then they come to you and they from what you told me, the industry is struggling. They're facing an enormous amount of stress from the handlers.
Yep.
So what do they say to you?
And what do we say to them? I mean, you know, what's really hard about this industry is that we know a lot of our growers. I mean, you know, some of them are friends. At least
growers are pushed to diversify in order to supplement their income. Currently, an area of interest is on renewable energy. Tell me about the research when we're looking at renewable energy. How does it fit in with the cranberry bogs?
So, well, and then again, that's a great question. If you drive just down 495, you'll see that there's some windmills out there. So some of the growers are looking into wind energy, again, to supplement their farm income, which is on a downward trek, unfortunately. And then solar farms are something that some growers are looking at. There's the dual use SMART program, which the state is looking for, trying to provide some ways for farms to diversify so they can have alternate forms of income. So that's one way. It's still very much in a fledgling state. You know, there are not any cranberry projects yet where they're still trying to grow cranberries with the solar panels on top of them.
To briefly summarize the UMass Cranberry Center, think of it as a hospital, strictly for the cranberries. Whether you are a grower or just a consumer, There is so much to be learned about this northern native perennial berry. So it seems like there are a lot of cool things that are happening here. I will call them miracles, but how far can your work extend? What can you not do in regards to the berry?
Well, as far as us specifically here, we don't do any genetic breeding here. A lot of that work is going on down in New Jersey at Rutgers University or out at the University of Wisconsin. So they actually have breeding programs because, as you could imagine, with a perennial woody fruit, it's a long-term commitment to be able to do that. And so we felt as the industry, it's expensive, and just to have it located in those two areas works well. We don't do anything that involves product development. You know, food science, we specifically don't do those kinds of things, nor anything directly related to health benefits. So we're really very horticultural, production, pest management oriented.
The center's current projects include, but not limited to, researching solar panels on cranberry bogs, using drones to map plant stress in order to evaluate irrigation techniques, understanding the biology of scale, all while keeping an eye on climate change. Well, that was quite the production, and you can actually contact them, the Cranberry Station. You can contact them to see if you can go and visit or to learn more about what their work there, what they're doing. Either you're a farmer or just somebody curious about the cranberries. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Well, thank you for being here with us this morning. We are broadcasting live from our WCTV studio. This is Good Morning Wareham, your source for local news, weather report, traffic information, and extra juicy information. And now for a moment in history, let's take a look at where we were today in history. Well, today in 1863, the historical Battle of Gettysburg, begins in Pennsylvania. The battle between Union and Confederates lasted 3 days and resulted in General Lee and the Southerners retreating back to Virginia. This was the largest battle ever fought in North America, with around 160,000 people fighting, nearly 7,000 dead, 10,000 missing and 32,000 wounded. Also today in 1979, the first Sony Walkman was sold. For that who may not remember, the device was a portable cassette player that allowed people to listen to music on the go listen to music on high quality. The device wasn't an immediate success. In 1979, the device costed $150, while today would be $529. Also, another pop culture event in 1984, the Motion Picture Association of America debuted PG-13 rating. This was in response to borderline movies that blended the lines between PG and R rated. The first film released with PG-13 was, was Red Dawn. And also for today's birthday, we are throwing a shout out to Walter White. No, not the drug maker from Breaking Bad. This Walter White was born in 1893, and he was a civil rights activist leading the NAACP movement for about 25 years, and he would be 126 years old today. And that's all for today in History segment. To learn more cool historical facts, please go online under history.com. Stay with us. We'll be right back. The coffee segment is next. But first, let's take a look at our events calendar.
Okay.
Thank you for being with us this morning. This is Good Morning Wareham, your source for local news, weather, traffic information, and segments such as the one we're about to have. This is the coffee segment, and my guest today is Mcmahon, the creator, the carver of these amazing realistic owls, and he is in the studio this morning to talk a little bit about his craft. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me this morning. It's like a privilege to be here.
Well, you were not hard to get. I didn't think you would come. I was so excited when you said yes.
Well, I'm trying to promote my arts. It's a great having a creative outlet, but it's the opportunity to market my stuff on a format like this is, I don't know, it's very generous, and so I have to take the opportunity for doing it.
Well, you are quite the name in town. I first saw your birds when I was at Echo, Elizabeth and Company.
Yes.
And I saw the big one, the white owl.
The snowy owls.
Yes.
That's snowy owls. We have them. They come and visit our neighborhood, in the wintertime. I got a secret spot where I go and I take pictures of them in the wintertime.
Yeah.
It's nothing like seeing the owls in the wild.
Yeah. So you take pictures of them and then you come home and you start carving them. So let's talk a little bit about how you got started. I mean, your art is so realistic. What fuels that?
Well, it's like I saw a wood carving in a gift shop up in North Conway where my folks used to live, and I was just totally amazed that it was actually just a piece of wood. It couldn't be a piece of wood, and I started reading books and trying to figure it out how to do it on my own, and I did that for quite a while. I've taken a few seminars, and taking seminars is like you're just learning how somebody else's approaches, and you could just learn so much. I'm taking lessons from a fellow named Al Jordan, who lives up in Rochester, New York, and he came in second place in the World Championship competition this past year. So taking lessons from somebody of that high caliber is a privilege.
Now, your things, your craft here, to me, and I think anybody who knows you, I mean, these are as realistic as they can get, and they are spot on. So when you're telling me you're still taking seminars, I mean, what do they look for? What is a perfect carving look like?
Well, like each bird has like about 8,000 feathers. And I'm not able to get carve 8,000 individual feathers, but you want to be going after all the feather groups. Like you want to get the main feather groups. One thing I like, there's lots of books on carving, and they'll have patterns. And a lot of the patterns, they seem like the bird is at attention, like that there. How many times do you see a bird at attention when you're looking at birds? They're always in some kind of movement or some kind of doing something.
And that's what you're trying to...
Like this one right here with the owl in flight. It's like I like to envision that as... I like to envision that as the last thing a mouse is seeing. Yeah, it's like these are birds of prey. They are great at hunting rodents, and in some places, some farms, they actually put up barn owl boxes to attract the barn owls to help the rodent populations.
Okay, so, and that's why I went to your website and I discovered that there were so many types of owls?
Yeah.
Is it, or are these all mythical legends?
There's all types of different types of owls. I would have a hard time listing them all right now, but I have a screech owl.
Is this the one?
That's a life-size screech owl. This one flying is a miniature great horned owl. This here is a barn owl. And barn owls, I think, the creation of haunted houses, I think, came from barn owls, because they're a whitish owl that likes abandoned buildings, all right? And they have a blood-curdling call. So can you imagine going by an abandoned building and seeing a white thing floating across? They fly really slowly, this white owl just floating across and then giving a blood-curdling call. Like, does that remind you of a ghost or not?
Oh my God.
Another thing with this here is it's not just carving the bird, it's just doing the whole presentation. And this here, I have it on a Celtic cross gravestone.
Yes. Can we get a close-up of this bird, please?
And I wanted to come up with a name, a magical and mystical name for the gravestone. It's like something better than Sam. But it's like there's a Celtic myth about the ancient bride of the dead. And it's, the whole story is on my website. But it's a mythical thing where if this prince, if he is going to become king, he has to marry like kind of a wife.
Yes.
And his uncle doesn't want him to be king, so he puts a curse on him so that he cannot marry a human bride. So another uncle like creates this woman out of flowers, like for him to be his bride. But lo and behold, this woman falls in love with somebody else, and it's a
So
thing.
you entertain yourself.
It's nice to have a story to go along with the carving. It's a kind of.
And that's what you provide too on your website. You don't only show your carvings, but you bring them to life, not only by the details, but by this as the legends, the stories that you.
The stories. It's something mystical and magical about owls. They're wonderful creatures. I live in an area out by Little Harbor, and I can hear the screech owls. I can get the screech owls to come into my backyard at night, and it's like, which is really cool. I can hear the great horned owls at night, and they're a little bit skittish. They don't come in. It's usually seeing a great horned owl. It's like I'm just getting a glimpse of it after it's spotted me and it's flying away, and. It is so neat to see these birds in the wild. It just gives you a whole different perspective.
Yes, and they're known to be wise as well.
They are known to be wise.
They are associated with wisdom.
They're smart enough to like camouflage and stay hidden and stuff like that.
So how many hours does it take per bird? And mind you, you said you start with this.
Yeah, I start with a block of wood like this here, and I can put anywhere in from, usually most owls, like kind of carving and painting them are somewhere around 100 hours.
Oh my God.
This screech owl right here, that probably has around 250 hours into it. There's a lot of detail. I'm working on a life-size great horned owl, and for most people, if you looked at it, they would think it was finished. I still have about 80 hours worth of just fine detail painting to put the feather detail on all the individual feathers.
Wow, so you're looking at anywhere between 100, 200 plus hours per hour.
Yes.
And do you think people understand that? I mean,
no,
they're not cheap, but at the same time, they're not as expensive as if you equate 200 plus hours.
No, I try to do a reasonable price, and it's I have a number of pieces that are on sale. This month I have a bunch of events coming on. I was in the local newspaper. I have the interview here. I have a couple of shows coming up this week.
Yes.
And then I have my work over at the Elizabeth's Echo Shop. And so for the month of July, I'm doing a sale for 25% off my carvings that are in Elizabeth's. And Elizabeth is helping me. She's taken a little bit off the commission. So it's not just coming from me. It's like Elizabeth is helping me with this promotion.
Oh, very nice.
But it's going to be at my other local shows. I'm going to have some postcards saying, please visit Elizabeth's.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Now, what is the hardest part about this process? Where do you have to really pay attention to?
You have to know your subject. You have to study the bird. You can't carve something that you don't know.
Well said.
It's this carving right here, for instance, is there was just a number of photos on the internet that I was able to find. And I was at a craft show last year, and somebody gave me this piece of wood, the driftwood. And it's like it was hollowed out. And the trick with this is how do you get a piece of wood and get the carving to fit in there? I had to do this like a jigsaw puzzle, like to get it to blend in. But this here is a great horned owl family with the baby owls and stuff like that. And it was just a beautiful project. It's just like I would love to see this in the wild.
And can this weather the wild? You'd love to see the family in the wild. Okay.
Yeah, I would love to see that in the wild. In the early that's in the early spring is when they nest. They nest. The great horned owls nest before any of the other birds, so they will take over red-tailed hawk nest. They've actually been known to take over osprey's nest and eagle's nest. And it's like, for the most part, the birds just look at a great horned owl and just say, I'm going to move on.
I'm going to move on.
I'll go find someplace else to go. Large birds of prey. Their talons have something like 500 pounds of clamping power. So it's almost like, imagine doing a handstand on your pinky. That's what, that's the kind of power that the owl is grasping onto its prey. So the prey doesn't suffer at all.
The prey does not suffer at all. Yeah, say that to the prey, poor thing. And you have this presentation. Tell me a little bit about this piece.
This piece right here was, this is basically a miniature carving of a screech owl as you would see it in the wild. A good friend of mine who works at a tree company dropped off this log with, he knows I'm into wood carving, and he dropped off the log, and I was able to cut that and just make a wall hanging with just a screech owl sticking his head out of the nose. Out of the hole in the thing. I did recently, over in Onset Square at Dudley Square in Onset.
Yes.
There was a tree that had a hole in it, and a tree to have a hole in it that big, there's something wrong with the tree. And I talked to the beautification, I talked to Kat Jones, and she talked to the Beautification Society for me, and gave me permission to put one of my carvings in a live tree.
Yeah.
And it was there for a little over a year, but the tree had to come down. And so what we did is they saved that section of the tree, and I was first thinking of doing a wall hanging, but then somebody suggested they wanted it hanging from their porch, like a porch looking out at the sky.
Yes, yes.
And not everybody has a porch to hang it, so I did it up as to do as a window art. And This here we auctioned off at the fundraiser for the fireworks to raise money for the fireworks. It did not get as much money as I was like, but they actually made over $14,000.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I was a part of that.
Yes.
And so it's like every little bit helps.
Now, something like that. I mean, you put it in an answer. Didn't people? Weren't you afraid people were just going to steal the owl?
I had it. I had a bolt going down into the tree. They would have had to take half the tree with them to steal it. And if somebody did steal it,
yeah,
I would have had to take that just as a compliment.
Okay.
You know what I mean? if they liked my work enough to steal it, it's like, thank you very much. You know what I mean? I can only do the best I can, and it's like kind of what other people do.
Yeah.
It's like it cannot be my concern. Yeah.
Now, if people are not going to Elizabeth and Company, your work can also be at ST.
I have a few pieces on SD.
Okay, and
then it's the welcome. If anybody's interested in seeing some of the work that I have, I do my work on my porch. And like out at Little Harbor, and anybody's willing to stop by anytime if they want to see how I actually do the work.
How does your house look like? How many birds everywhere?
It's a mess.
You know,
it is a total mess. So if they're willing to put up with the total mess, they can stop by, and I'd be more than willing to show them how I did it. I was active this past weekend. I was actually working on some. I did some great white sharks.
Oh yes, you started doing that. You did the whales.
I did. Well, I'm doing whales in the style of Moby Dick.
Yes.
In a folk art style of Moby Dick, and I did a great white shark. And one thing that I'm trying to do to give it the real Cape Cod flavor is I'm trying to carve quahog shells to use as the teeth. And they are very difficult to carve. I'm using a belt sander, and I'm carving it, and I get them to just about where I want them, and they just totally disintegrate on me.
What do you mean they call like teeth? How? Paint me a picture a little bit.
It's I don't know if I can paint you a picture.
Hey.
It's the shark's teeth.
Oh my goodness.
And
So your work does not...
It's the one with the quahog shell teeth is over at Elizabeth's, and I don't know if you can see.
Oh my goodness. Those are quahogs.
Those are quahog shells. Using the quahog shells as thing, you're not supposed to use ivory or anything like that. When I mentioned I was using quahog shells, somebody said like kind of, well, have you thought about using piano keys? They're like kind of, because that's ivory.
Yes.
But I don't have a piano hanging around.
It might be, yes, you gotta find a piano.
You gotta take it apart, and then I live close to the beach. Just walk down to the beach, pick up a bunch of quahog shells, and try to shape them into the shape of what I would think the shark teeth look like, and I think it gives it that extra Cape Cod flavor.
Absolutely. So this is interesting. So this is not the full span of what you can do. What other new things are you experimenting on, pushing your craft?
Well, I'm just like one thing with the sharks and the whales is when I'm these here, I'm using a wood called tupelo, which is a very fine grain. But when I'm doing the sharks and the whales, I'm just using rough pine from a local sawmill. There's a sawmill over in Rochester. I can't think of the name of it, but I'll just go and I'll get you some rough cut boards.
Yes.
It's tough to go to Home Depot and get the boards the way you want. So I go to the sawmill and get them. And then I rough cut them up. But one thing I do to get it to look aged and almost like driftwood, is like I'm burning them with a butane torch to raise the grain, and it just gives it just brings out the grain, and I think it just adds beauty to the carving.
Now, you mentioned the wood. I mean, is there the best type of wood for this kind of carving?
Well, there's different. I do power carving, which I'm using power tools. It's like a Dremel. It's kind of like a Dremel tool, but I have mine are like a Dremel on steroids, and it's almost a dental tool. And you use little bits, and with the Tupelo, it works good. I mean, you do have to have dust collecting systems so that you're not breathing in the dust.
Yes.
But Tupelo is great for doing the birds, the whales and the sharks. I'm doing those out of pine.
Okay.
To try to give them the folk art style. I mean, folk art, Cape Cod, like old carving style. And this bird on the end here.
Yes.
That was done for somebody who wanted an owl looking over their garden.
Okay.
And most of my carvings do not go outside. That one there was just done with a piece of cedar. And cedar is a little bit difficult to work with because the wood has to be dried and cured a little bit before you start working with it, because as you're working with it, if you don't have it dried, it cracks and the checks start opening up on you.
Yes.
And they might not be coming out where you want it, but that was a difficult project. So I had to carve it so much, I had to paint it with glue so it would dry slowly. That is made to go outside. I have that one named the Guardian of the Garden.
Guardian of the Garden.
Yes, and that is. You can notice that it's a nice red color. Is basically the natural color of the wood, and as it ages, it becomes gray. Dull, like gray driftwood color. The screech owl comes in both a red and a gray phase. So as it starts, it's going to be the red phase, and if it's out in somebody's yard for a year or two, it's going to turn gray. So it's going to be representing the owl no matter how old it gets.
You know, another person I met who does carves completely different. Skip Way.
Yes, he works down at Elizabeth as well.
Yes, so he's a little bit different because he works with wet wood. His has to be completely wet, while yours you have to dry it up before you can do anything with it. Oh my goodness! Do pieces break on you? Have you ever done something you're almost there and something snaps?
Yes.
And if so, what do you do? How do you disguise it?
Well, after I stop swearing.
You're telling me this is not a relaxing job?
It is relaxing. Some people think it's like I need a lot of patience and it's not really patience for doing something you like.
Okay.
It's like if you're doing something you like, you can spend hours doing it. Sometimes it's not so much breaking, it's like getting to a roadblock where I don't know what to do next. Yeah, I mean, I get to a thing like this carving right here. I started this about 10 years ago, and I wasn't quite sure how to fit. The wings are separate, the feet are separate.
Separate meaning you had to glue them back?
Yeah, I had to glue them together.
Oh my goodness.
And it's just learning techniques on how to blend them together. Yeah, like just doing the joints, hiding the joints by texturing where the joint is so it blends in, so most people cannot find where the actual joint is. I have done other birds where I'll do that as one piece of wood. But when
This is one piece.
That is one piece of wood.
Okay.
Most of the birds I do is one piece. This one right here, that was inserted into the piece of driftwood, that I had to do, it's 3 pieces just so it would fit in.
Okay.
And so that there, again, I had to hide where the seams are, where the wood is, because it's very difficult to get it to meet perfectly. And so you're doing texturing, you're texturing the wood, you're putting the feathers in, and as you put in the feathers in, you can use those to break up where the seam line is. It's very creative.
It's beyond creative. So are you also teaching classes if somebody would love to learn about what you do? Do you offer those services?
If somebody wants to learn, they're willing to come over, and I'd be willing to show them what I do. It's like I have not been given. There's one fellow down the Cape that I go over and help him with projects. It's not something for the faint of heart. You're gonna have to have a desire to do it.
Okay.
And it's not cheap. You know, I mean, some of the tools. Just this block of wood is probably, if you went to buy this in the store, it'd probably be $25. And it just the block of wood to start with. And
now they don't come like this. This is not a kit. You have to do this.
Some they do. There's a store in Attleboro that sells a lot of wood carving supplies, and you can get cutouts and you can get roughouts, which is, you know, I mean, it's if you get a roughout, it's somebody else's idea of what the owl is, and you're tied in to do what that is. Like if you get a roughout, and the owl is looking this way, but you want the owl to look that way, there's not much you can do about it. If you start with a square block of wood, you can do anything you want with it.
So like this one, I figured these are the legs?
No.
No.
The legs are going to be sitting like so, just right here. This is going to be the wings, the tail is right here, and the head is square, so I can turn this any which way I want. One of the first things I do when I'm starting with a block of wood like this is finding a nice piece of driftwood.
Okay.
And then mounting it to the driftwood. And having a nice mount balanced on the driftwood is having it I think is very important.
Okay.
I've been to carving shows where people do wonderful carvings, but they don't know how to balance their carvings. And I don't know if you've ever been on a bar stool and you've been leaning back.
Yes,
You're leaning back and you're about to fall over.
Yes.
That's how I picture this guy's carvings. So I figure they're drunken carvings because they're just not right. You know what I mean? To have a carving balanced, you know what I mean? So, like, one thing you look for is, like, if the eyes are level.
Yeah.
But that's not always true, because sometimes, the owl is turning his head in such a way which justifies, which is the overall pose.
Okay.
Yeah, but it is such a blessing to have a creative outlet such as this.
Well, I'm so happy that you live in our town and you are this talented. As I said, your carvings are a wow piece. You know, you can envision it out in the garden. You can envision it as a centerpiece on your table.
Yeah.
Just
most of my carvings are not out in the garden, but I have that one that was deliberately made. It doesn't have all the fine detail, but it has the essence of the bird, and it's made with the cedar wood. It's finished with marine varnish, so it would be protected for the outside. But most of if you want an owl to be outside to protect, to scare other birds away, go to the hardware store and get one of those $25 like plastic owls.
Yes.
Like, this is not the stuff. This is like this is a centerpiece.
Now, how can people also, do you take orders like such as this, right? People can request a specific owl, right?
People can request a specific owl.
Okay.
It's I work full time too. I work at a local sober home, which helps like recovering drug addicts and alcoholics. It just basically give them a place to live, like while they like pursue their own recovery.
Yes.
But I work full time, and then it's nights and weekends. I'm trying to spend as much time as this here, and then occasionally getting out for a bike ride or do something.
Oh my goodness. Well, let me just remind people where else they can find your work. They can find your work with a great discount at Echo, Elizabeth and Company, home offerings, right at the Tremont Nail Factory compound. They can also find it at ST. Is that a store or online shop?
That's an online stuff.
Okay, and also we have Collections Gallery in Sandwich, Massachusetts.
Sandwiches, a few of my carvings over there. And you can always stop by on Little Harbor Road in Wareham, just past the golf course. Sometimes I'm out working in the driveway, but if my car's in the driveway, it's like people are more than welcome to stop by on like nights or weekends. Like, most weekends I'm working at trying to create art. There's I got a couple of shows coming up this month.
Yep.
I'm going up to New Brunswick, Canada for a competition in August. In October and November get very busy. There's like there's an Audubon show down in Rhode Island.
Yes.
Then there's a big show down in Eastern Maryland where they take over the whole town. It's a whole waterfowl festival, and I'm trying to get into the Duxbury Art Show. Oh, so it's like the fall gets quite busy.
Well, thank you so much for being in the studio with us this morning to share a little bit about your work.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me. Take care.
This concludes our morning show segment. My guest was Mark Madden, the creator of these amazing owls, and he did mention a few places where you can find his work. If you missed us this morning, the show will rebroadcasted at 6 p.m. this evening, and also will go on our YouTube channel at Wareham Community Television YouTube. We do not have a show on Friday, but I'll be here on Wednesday with more. With that, I say good day, Wareham. Bye.